Hi everyone, this is Jenna Griffiths of Earth Uni. We have Richard Unger and several other hand analysts with us here today to discuss broken lifelines and also broken heart lines. Welcome everyone.
Oh, everything is all broken, Jenna.
Oh, we have Kate Packard with us. Hi, Kate.
Oh, it's all broken. What are we going to do? Everything is broken.
Richard. So I'm just going to, instead of not break the page and put the print right on the front so you can see what's there. So I put in the doc, I put mostly the lifelines first, but sometimes it's both.
Why don't we talk about breaks in a major line to begin with?
That's a great idea.
And then we could take a look at particular breaks.
Okay.
But do lines break, Jenna? I'll answer for you. Yes, lines break all the time. Yeah, it's, you know, if you're looking at somebody's hands and you find a break, it's not your job as the hand reader to let your hair catch on fire and scream about it. Oh, it's a break in a major line. Okay, that stuff happens all the time. And let me take a step back about the very concept of lines itself. The lines weave in and they blend in with each other and they flow and they bounce off each other, and the lines in the hands are poetic. Let me explore that theme for a couple of sentences worth.
I like that.
It's one thing to have a declarative sentence. The temperature today is 21 degrees centigrade. Okay, that is, you know, there's a subject, there's an object, there's a factual statement, there's a period at the end, you can diagram it, etc., like that. But then there's poetry. You know, songbirds dig, cloud formations high. Who knows what that means? You've got to read the verb doesn't fit in the sentence. It might not even have a subject and object in the same sentence. It might not even be a sentence. Poetry flows in and out. It's more a stream of consciousness. You have to read the whole thing. You have to read it several times to get the meaning. And even then, the meaning is a very subjective meaning. Somebody else could get a different meaning. And who's to say what's right? It's poetry. And as a matter of fact, as you know, Jenna, I was a literature major in college. That's my degree. And as a matter of fact, I am absolutely so grateful. It was perfect training for becoming a professional hand reader. Who knew that? It's the study of symbolism, study of how a story, it's the study of story, it's the study of character development and character possibilities. It's the study of poetry as well. Poetry, I couldn't take poetry classes when I was a freshman, sophomore. My understanding of literature was too weak. My ability to read, I couldn't really read poetry yet. I mean, I could read it, but I couldn't read and understand the same way I was able to do when I was a senior in college. And I equate that in some ways with being able to see in hand reading, to have vision, to be able to look at the lines and register what's going on. And when I started to read hands, it was just a mishmash. I couldn't even figure out the basic patterns in the hands. I could find the major lines. And even then, you know, what does it mean when the heart line splits in a bunch of directions? The fate line hits the heart line and the heart line starts to split and move in different directions. Is it a Jupiter-based heart line? Is it a Saturn-based? Well, you know, you can go this way, you can go that way. And you know what I'm talking about. Even on the major lines, and even something as simple as there are 4 heart line types is not so simple when you look at a bunch of hands. You could look at 100 hands and find a dozen heart lines that clearly are the genotype, the Donotype, Clint and Michael, using our nicknames for them. But you've got another 80% of the heart lines that have, you know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it takes a while before you're comfortable with that. Again, reading the lines is like reading poetry, and they flow into each other. It's like a river, you know, the blue stream and the green stream crisscross, and there's a little bit of blue now in the green stream and a little bit of green in the blue stream. Oh, hold it over here. There's a little bit of green that just jumped 3/4 of an inch and went someplace else after it bounced into the blue stream. This is the way hands work. This is the norm. And from my perspective, what this represents is, this is how our brains are. Since the lines in the hands are a wiring diagram, we're not wired for straight out fact. We have, you know, we have the capability of understanding that type of sentence. Again, today's temperature is whatever I said, 21 degrees centigrade. So we have the capability of analyzing that. But because the lines look more like a poetic stream of consciousness, apparently, that's a more accurate representation of the neuron traffic that the lines in the hands are conveying. And I went through a search, this was last week, I think. I went through a search on the internet and didn't find a proper diagram. I was looking for a color diagram. I was looking for atom smash pictures. Have you seen pictures of how atoms bump into each other and then they spray all over the place? Have you seen pictures of that, Jenna?
Of atoms, yes, yeah, I have. That's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. And it's pictures from, you know, the Hadron Collider in Switzerland, etc. And they smash the atoms, or they smash the nucleus of atoms, etc. And then they colorize the resulting picture. Beautiful, beautiful abstract designs are created. But I didn't find a diagram that I liked. I was going to use that as a way to convey my concept that the lines in the hands are poetic. They're not nonfiction. They're poetry. And
I love that analogy, Richard.
Oh, thank you. So with that in mind, when we look at breaks in the line, okay, breaks in the line, that's not nothing, it's not something weird and terrible. It can convey something weird and terrible. I mean, that's on the list of possibilities, but it's the stuff that happens with lines. They break, they bump into each other, and even lines that aren't broken, they constantly move out of their normal sphere of influence. They're pushed out of their usual trajectory. On the hand we're looking at here, the heart line is way lower than usual. And then there's a line above the heart line, which is like the leftover heart line energy, finishing up the work of the heart line crew. And the break in the lifeline, look at the bottom half of the break. The bottom half of the break in the lifeline is not curvy. It's straight. Is that lifeline or is that fate line? I mean, if you took the rest of the hand and covered it up and just looked at the fate line moving north-south, you've got, yeah, draw that in red, thank you very much. And then draw the bottom piece, which is connected to the lifeline, the broken piece of the lifeline. If you just color that in, yes, please go north on that. Thank you very much. It's great for me to think it, and there it is showing up on my screen. I guess in the new holographic quantum computers, I'll just be able to think it and the lines will appear.
Where you look.
Yes, just by looking. But if you look at it that way, that's not a piece of the lifeline, that's a piece of the fate line. Clearly, you just have a broken fate line. That's how they look. And do fate lines break? Well, yeah.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, I don't know, maybe more fate lines break than don't break. It depends on which culture you're in, I suppose. But broken fate lines, that's, you know, that's really common. But when we were looking at the lifeline, if you'll erase the red, please. By the way, can you change your pen color?
Yeah, I can. Shall I do that rather? Shall
Yes, erase the red. Please erase the red. Is there a button? Erase?
Sure, I have to do them
cool.
individually.
And now do the lifeline in blue, if you will, or yellow. Take your pick.
Purple, okay.
Oh, there we go.
Do you want me to do the whole thing?
Yeah, do the bottom piece. Yeah, now it just looks like a lifeline. Hold it a second. Is that bottom piece lifeline? Is that bottom piece fate line? And it took me a few years before I got comfortable with this. But apparently that bottom piece is lifeline and fate line. And that piece going diagonally below the southern piece of the lifeline. Yeah. Is that the Mercury line? Well, it looks like the Mercury line. There's another piece of Mercury line north of it, broken off, just a tendril. Yeah, thank you. But the bottom piece of the Mercury line, the most southern piece of the Mercury line, is finishing up the work of the lifeline, isn't it? It's like surrounding Venus, just like a lifeline is supposed to. So in this hand, the lifeline is actually made up of some lifeline, some fate line, and some Mercury line. Is the hand allowed to do this?
Well, the hand can do it. It's just like people, you know.
Just like people. Just like people. They do anything they darn well please, and then some people try to make up a reason afterwards. But, you know. Nonetheless, this is the norm. This is the poetry of the palm. This is how the lines in the palm inscribe themselves. And so breaks in the line are part of the poetic license that the hands are capable of using. And the same way, as a lit major, by the way, I would read a piece of poetry, like a 4 or 5 page piece of poetry from the late 1800s or the early 1900s, which, by the way, was my favorite period, American poetry, in that 40-year span. I would read a poem a dozen times over. And I would read it and then sit for a couple of minutes. I'd read it. I'd look out the window at the tree. I'd take a few breaths, think of nothing, and come back and read it again. And after...
Sounds like hands.
Yeah, exactly. I'm drawing a direct parallel. And after doing that, you know, at some point it all clicked for me. I had it, it started to fit in. But my first reading, I didn't get the nuances of what was being said. And the poet, you know, we're reading world famous poets in poetry class. People who 100 and 100 and plus years after they wrote, people are still reading their poetry. So these are world-class poets. The poet knew we weren't going to get the full import on the first reading. The design of the poetry was such that it took a second and third reading to start to get into the poetry. And, you know, with a Simeon crease, I would do it a dozen times or even 20 times. And then there was a point at which I understood what was being said. And I also remember I was in a class. There was maybe 16 people in my poetry class, the one I'm remembering right now. And we're reading Wallace Stevens or somebody else. And the professor would ask a question. I'd raise my hand and nobody else in the room would raise their hand. And a lot of the class was just me and the professor talking about the poem. And part of the problem with the other students, looking backwards, was that there were freshmen, sophomores, and even juniors in that class who, you know, read the poem once if they read it. They didn't read it enough times. They didn't see what was in there. They didn't respond on the second level, the third level, the fourth level. And, you know, if when I was a freshman, I had like 30 hours of homework a week in classes. I had to read Moby Dick in 1 week. And then next week, they gave us 2 weeks to read War and Peace because they were being generous. And this is one class. That's one class. Remember, we're going to discuss in detail and be tested on it. So, you know, at that point, as a senior, you know, I didn't have classes with the same amount of homework, and I was a senior. I was old. By the way, I was a senior. This was my 7th year in college. I had an interruption to military service. So I was older than the other kids in my class, and you know, they just weren't reading it the same number of times. They couldn't possibly answer the questions intelligently posed by the professor, not in a literature class, because the questions weren't factual. They were more texture-ish. And that's the flavor that I look for in hands. And practice, practice, practice. The more hands you read, the more comfortable you get with the poetry in the lines, the less you fight the dualistic, tripleistic, quadrupleistic possibilities in the hands, the more you embrace the dualisms, you know, the delicious dilemmas, the conflict of opposites, the more you surrender to the hand language and not impose your own, this is what I want the hands to be telling me, thinking, the more you can do that, the easier it is to look at the hand and go, oh yeah, I see what's going on. Okay, so that's my, you know, that's my overview statement. Or that's 80% of my overview. I have a little bit more I want to say. That's about hands in general, lines in general. I want to talk specifically about breaks next. But do you want to jump into this conversation? Do you want to add a question or whatever?
I just wanted to say, I mean, I love that analogy about poetry, Richard, because I think it's so apt. But also, you studied ancient literature, mythology, didn't you? Didn't you read a lot of the ancient texts?
Yeah. So, well, we didn't read the ancient texts so much, but we read books that were descriptive of the ancient texts, and we had to read, you know, in freshman literature, we had to read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and for me, I had read those in high school already as well, so I was reading them for the second time. But to understand the Iliad and the Odyssey, you had to know something about who the Greek gods were, because they were referred to over and over. So we had Edith Hamilton's textbook on mythology. So I didn't read all the ancient myths. I read textbooks about it, and then the application thereof in works. Well, we had to read Plato, etc., in freshman lit. So I have a familiarity. I wouldn't say an expertise.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's certainly been useful for hand analysis, you know, because...
Oh, my word, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, my word,
Thank
yes.
goodness you had that background.
Well, there's that, and there's also the work of Shinoda Bolen, and I can't praise her high enough. Bolen.
Yeah, she's
Shinoda
wonderful.
And she's local. She's here in the Bay Area, or she was last time I checked. And Alana and I went to a lecture of hers when she was a brand new author. She was out with her first book, and she was so shy. And she was talking at a bookstore. There must have been 50 people, everybody, you know, crowding. It's a little tiny bookstore, and everybody crowding, you know, hanging from the rafters to talk to the woman who wrote this wonderful book. And this was The Goddesses in Every Woman book, as I recall. And she was so shy, and it was so charming to be in her presence. And I've seen her, you know, 10 years later, speaking on TV and another public appearance. Oh, she was so polished. She was so good at answering questions from the crowd. By the way, Deepak Chopra was the same. His beginning, his speeches, his talks, his interviews when he was a beginner in the public communications realm were almost embarrassing to watch. My word. The guy couldn't get 2 consecutive words out of his mouth that made sense. But of course, now he's eloquent. He was always eloquent in writing, but now he's an eloquent speaker as well. That's a good reminder for all us hand readers who are verging into the communicate in public sphere, that you get better with practice, and it's hard to be good. It's hard to be as elegant as you will be later on, before it's later on.
So, yeah, I love her books as well. And I actually have it here, Richard. Look.
Oh, there you go.
So people can actually see it.
Oh, that's a schnazzier looking version than the one I have.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll put the link on the page too.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So you wanted to be more specific too, Richard.
I want to talk specifically about breaks in the lines.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was talking about lines, and now breaks in the lines, and the next thing is going to be break in this particular line. So a break in the line is like a circuit being clicked off. And as a matter of fact, okay, so we click off the circuits here overnight. This is something that a bunch of my European friends do. Do you click off your circuits overnight, or do you leave them on?
I click them off in the bedrooms. I mean, there's a special thing where they go off. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know anybody else in the States who does that, but multiple friends of mine do that in Switzerland. And Andre Studer, the late, great Andre Studer, designed his apartment houses back in the 1960s to have the easy capacity to do that, because he thought it was an important thing to do. You know, think of that for a second. That's over 50 years ago.
That's phenomenal. But these days here, most people in the bedrooms have that. It's like a...
Yeah. Yeah, so that you're not sleeping with all the electric circuits moving and the wireless stuff. You're reducing that. So a circuit going off, a circuit being able to be clicked back on, is that problematic? That's part of my point. That's not necessarily problematic at all. Mm-hmm. By the same token, have you ever had trouble having your circuits go off and trouble getting them back on?
Yep, sure.
I've had that problem. I had that problem with the internet more than once. I think I lost a call to you once because I couldn't get the internet for an hour and a half.
I think we had to find you on the telephone instead. Luckily, you had a backup circuit.
Yeah, there's that. Also, in my motorhome, we have 3 sets of, actually 4, but 3 multiple sets of fuse boxes, 2 that are very easy to get to, and 1 you need to be a mechanic to get to. That was strange design. Wow. I guess they didn't think those circuits would go off too much. And then there's a single fuse that if it's not in and turned exactly right, the bed won't come down and go back up into the ceiling, which is a significant problem if you're in a motorhome. But nonetheless, the circuits are designed to be easily replaced. So my point that I'm overemphasizing, I suppose, is that the fact that there's a break in the line, it indicates that there's a circuit issue. The circuits go out at times. And it could either be problematic or not problematic, depending upon how the person handles it. If you can't get to the fuse box, imagine that I'm in rural Utah. Have you ever been in rural Utah?
No, I think fortunately not.
I've been in rural Utah. I've been in rural Utah in the motorhome. I've been in rural Utah in a car. Utah is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Right. Oh my word. The desert is absolutely phenomenal. There's 5 national parks in Utah. Wow. I think I've been to 4 of them. And I've spent weeks camping in the national parks of Utah. It's mind-blowing, and especially for somebody from Switzerland, who's, the mountains of the United States, Yosemite, Yellowstone, they're beautiful, but it looks a bit like Switzerland. But not the desert. The desert doesn't look anything like Switzerland. But anyway, you can go 100 miles and have no cell phone connection. Easy. No cell towers.
Yeah.
Imagine that we get off the road and we go behind a big sand dune and we park, and imagine that one of the circuits is broken.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That did happen once to us, and I was able to get to it. But if it was the circuit that needed a mechanic to get to, Alana and I, one of us would have had to walk back to the road and flag down a car
Oh my
and
gosh.
hitchhike into town to get a mechanic out to help us. It could be extremely
And
problematic.
it could also be a day before a car arrives.
Well, no, we were close enough. Yeah, it can be. And as a matter of fact, what if we had gone 15 miles on some small road? It could be a month before a car goes by on a small road.
True. Mm-hmm.
Wow. In any event, it could be enormously problematic, and it could be not problematic at all. Okay. So think of the heart line with a break. When the heart line is break, the person becomes unemotional. The emotional circuit is severed. So, is that a problem? It could very well be a problem. A, the person for whom this is happening to may have zero awareness that this is going on. And as a matter of fact, this is very similar to the black box syndrome associated with the Simeon crease. In effect, the mental circuit is working and the emotional circuit is not. In the emotional Simeon, you can have the emotional circuit working and the mental circuit is not. And the owner possibly doesn't even know it.
Pity we don't have any examples here. We don't have any Simeon lines in this document.
Well, so any Simeon would do this. I'm just using it as an example of a circuit problem. And so, you know, I have a Simeon, and at times it's been reported to me that my communications were much more hard-edged, critical sounding than I had any idea. I didn't think it was coming out that way.
Could you just put your hand up quickly to show us your Simeon?
Yeah. It's just one line straight across the middle of the hand. Yeah.
Great.
So, by the way, there's a similar problem that can occur. Differences that people are trying to email back and forth. People can come off very harsh in an email, which, you know, if they were talking to somebody face to face, it wouldn't the same meaning wouldn't have been implied, because you have eyebrow raises, you have body posture, you have tonation, and the email deletes all that because it's just a few words, and it's easy for people to get an impression that is not the impression or the conscious intention of the writer.
Absolutely, so, I couldn't agree more. And often they're projecting their own thoughts onto the email. You know?
All things are possible without the more multiple layers of communication possibilities in a face-to-face communications. My point is that when a person's heart line circuit clicks off and they do not know it, communication problems are completely possible, even likely. They could be compounded. They could go on for decades if the person recognizes that, oh my word, look how I'm being responded to. I'm being responded to as if I said, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, when I was actually saying, could you pass the salt? I guess you didn't hear me last time when I asked for the salt. I'd really like it. You know, that's a different communication than I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. You know, if the person turns around and throws the salt at your face, maybe they heard something different than what you think you said. So in any event, I'm pointing out that the circuit break associated with any of the major lines can range in problem factor from near 0 to near 100. And if the person is unaware of the break, and they stay unaware and they double down on their harsh communications, non-emotional communications, for instance, it could just get worse and worse and worse. Or the person goes, I am being responded to a certain way. I didn't think the fuse went off. Let me check my fuse box. And I'm using that as a comparative. By checking my fuse box, I'm rechecking my communications, rechecking my body language. I'm asking the person, can I reset? Apparently, we're having a communications issue here. Maybe, and I usually just take it on myself. Apparently, my last communications came out much harsher than was my intention. Can I talk to you personally, or what I really was trying to say is, can you pass the salt?
Yeah.
Is that okay with you? Or did you hear something different than what I said? And if it was negative, that's not really what I meant. So if the person can recognize the circuit break going off and recalibrate, take a breath, hit the reset button. If it's the heart line, try to communicate again. If it is the lifeline, well, I want to talk more about the lifeline and the heart line in particular. But to summarize, what I'm saying is when a major line breaks, the owner's challenge is to become conscious of the break, and from that position, change the fuse box. In other words, hit the reset button, regain your poise, start over. Okay, things are fine. Or if the person is somehow unable to or doesn't recognize the need for that and the issue compounds over time, it could be enormously problematic for the owner. Anyway, so that's my commentary on breaks in the major lines. And
Okay.
we'll go to the lifeline next. Do you have anything else? Do you have anything you want to add, question, or something like that?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question about that related to heartlines. So you were saying that the break on the heartline is quite similar in a way to the Simeon.
Well, similar to the black box syndrome that Simeons are prone to, yes.
Yeah. So I was thinking it's almost like one's in one's head, but not actually feeling one's body. So you're not feeling the other person, you're not sensing the other person through your body, but you're only...
I wouldn't say that.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
No,
I wouldn't say that at all. And I've heard other people suggest that to me. Mm-hmm. And they've also suggested it to me when they thought I was black boxing, although they wouldn't have used that language with me. And I beg to differ. And let me go into that. Mm-hmm. And I'm speaking as a member of the Simeon Club right now. If I say, I'm very upset with you because I've passed the salt to you every time you've asked, and now you're sitting next to the salt, I've asked you, I see by what you're doing that you've heard my request, but you're putting it off, and I'm upset about that. I've had people say, well, you're not in your body, you're not reacting to me, I don't feel like passing you the salt. I have other things I want to do that's more important, and the fact that you passed the salt to me before, I don't care, you can live without salt. No wonder I'm angry. You're talking to me like that. So don't tell me I'm not in my body right then, just because you don't like the content of my communications to you. On the other hand, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not in my body, but be very, very careful with that. Be very, very careful with that. And I've seen it and been personally involved in it. And there's a similar thing in a cliched form. And remember, this is a kind of a new age cliched Hollywood movie version. The woman says, we never talk, I want to know how you feel. And he says, I feel fine, the husband and wife. But I really want to know how you feel. Really want to know how you feel. Do you think my sister is prettier than me? What do you really think? Everything is fine. And no, I really want to know how you feel. Okay, yeah, your sister is prettier than you. Look at her. Wow, she's gorgeous. Wow. You're fine, but she's gorgeous. Oh, you never there's the thing about asking people how they really feel. And of course, that's not a feeling, that's an opinion, but you get the drift. The whole topic of feelings communication is an enlarged one, too big for our time frame today. Although it overlaps, because talking about the heart line and the circuit being broken. As a matter of fact, why don't we talk about the heart line first? You've got a heart line up there.
Okay.
It's an easier one perhaps to use as a starting point for the broken line conversation. This is a broken heart line. One way to think of it is the person who has this has a broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had a broken heart?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Did you have a broken heart in second grade? Did Johnny not want to talk to you? He wanted to talk to Sally, but he didn't want to talk to you. Did that ever happen?
Yeah, sure, of course.
And by the way, were you decimated in second grade, or when you were 15 and Johnny wanted to dance with Sally and didn't want to dance with you? Who knows what?
Yeah, I think it happens to everyone, Richard.
Yeah, well, I don't know about everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
we're agreeing that it's a common human experience.
Sure.
However, are most heart lines broken?
No, virtually none.
1%, something like that. So when the heart line is broken, in the simplest commentary, and sometimes I say this to the owner, sometimes I don't. Wow, your heart line is broken. In the old palmistry books, they talked about that as a broken heart. But broken heart, it's kind of a cliche. And if I told people that they've had emotional upsets in their life, who wouldn't nod their head in agreement? Mr. Client, Ms. Client, it's a broken heart. But what this indicates is that when a certain triggering is reached, your system responds like somebody who had a recent broken heart, and it represents a retreat into yourself in an attempt to protect you from having your heart broken by, in this case, this would be a spousal, because it's a Mercury break, to protect yourself from abandonment or in some other way, your heart being broken in love. And it's common, this marker, on people who have had a strong, a really strenuous heartbreak in their life compared to average, a heartbreak on steroids compared to other people. But I've also seen people who've never had any heartbreak at all, who kept their heart protected enough and never risked enough to have their heart broken completely. And to me, for those people, it's easy enough for me to say, Mr. Client, Ms. Client, that the heartbreak is a carryover into this life. Your heart was probably broken when you were born, this heart line formation. By the way, that's probably true. The heart line probably was like this when the person was born. Not 100%, but I'd say 80% likely the heart line was already broken. And it's probably a representation of parents' relationship. It could be a representation from a family pattern going back generations. It could be a genetic legacy. It could be a past life pattern. But all of these, whether any of these are true or not, I'm going to say Mr. or Ms. Client to indicate that this is how I might talk to a client about this. Regardless of whether any of these specific scenarios are literally true, you have the wiring in your brain like somebody who's been through that, such that there's a caution that you have in intimate relationships. There is like a hair trigger about being abandoned or love being withdrawn, and it's your challenge to respond to that in an appropriate way. An inappropriate response would be to make everybody else on the planet wrong. Another inappropriate response would be to stay protected in your castle keep, never venturing, never risking for love. These would be least optimal reactions. It would protect your heart. Another less optimal reaction would be to be a jerkhead as a relationship partner and create the very abandonment that you were fearful of. But the challenge associated with this is, well, since this is a Mercury break in the heart line, this is about intimacy and to communicate more, to be more forthcoming, to risk rejection by sharing yourself at a deeper level and to bring things to the surface sooner than you normally would. Do not take one upset as a chance to run away and hide from all intimacy. Well, if you do, that's one option, but it's not the most optimal option here. So this is one way I talk about the broken heart line. I'm talking clearly, right? You can follow the way I'm saying it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure.
But another way I talk about it, a person who is more advanced than that, I went 20 years without allowing any relationships in my life, but now I have a relationship and we do pretty good with each other. Okay, that's a different report. And I say, okay, well, in that case, I go to a secondary level in my discussion of the broken heart line. You are capable of being triggered in such a way that your communications, although you might feel that they are descriptive of how you're feeling, your partner is likely to report that you get cold and distant all of a sudden, and they don't necessarily know why. And that, to me, that's a black box version of this. And again, it's easy to correct in one sense. It's easy to countermeasure if the person is willing to look outside and have a defenseless listening, a defenseless observing, such that the feedback I'm getting indicates that I've been out of my emotional self. I guess the circuit was off. Okay. Let me bring myself back in here and let me talk to the person. I've been harsh, huh? That's what it sounds like you're saying. I guess my circuit went off. Yeah, you sounded like a person who was in your head and, was just being hard-edged defensive. Whew. Okay, I could take that in. Okay. So can we talk now, Mary? Can we talk now, Bob? So that's a person, let me just finish my thought here. That's a person who is aware enough to know that it's them. They have a circuit that goes off and they don't know when it happens. But they can take that feedback and go, my circuit must have been off. Okay, what's the big deal? Doesn't make me a bad boy, a bad girl. That's an old protective mechanism. I guess I'm sensitive. I hate being hurt. My feelings are I don't like to have my feelings hurt. And I guess my fuse box went off. The temperature was up too high and the fuse box went off. Now I have to go down to the basement, put in a new fuse, and then I could use the toaster. Okay, I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, if you take you, Richard, you've got lots of arches, which is fear-based. Yeah.
Two. That's not a lot of arches. What are you talking about?
It's not like this hand, which has 10. This particular hand is from my database and has 10.
Mm-hmm.
But
10 arches and a broken heart line?
Yeah. And a line of clairvoyance. But
oh, interesting. Yeah.
And healer lines, yeah. But so what I wanted to say is with arches, which is an existential fear, and the person would tend to go into their head and out of their body.
Not necessarily into their head. They can go out of their body by getting over emotional as well. Or
going into their persona, like the bully, like Donald Trump.
Well, that's one, that's one thing to do. But another person, let's say a person was a water person with lots of arches. They could go into flooding, where they're just constantly feeling and expressing, but there's no coherence and they're completely ungrounded. So I wouldn't agree with the statement that the arches make a person automatically get out of their feelings. But yeah, it's statistically more likely. I agree.
Okay.
But I wouldn't allow that's what always happens.
Sure. But I was just thinking, when you're giving advice to people, so for example, someone with a broken heart line like this,
and arches,
you could, say that part of your journey in this lifetime is to actually become more, go more into your body and feel yourself and feel others through by being more in your own body.
Well, I'd be very careful with that, and let me explain. By the way, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I don't like the communications possibilities that your description could possibly lead to. Because it sounds also like if you tell a person that, you see, you're not in your body, this is like that, again, I'm back to Hollywood B-movie, a new age movie. Mr. Husband person, you're not in your feelings. That's your problem. Go ahead, you know, we need to talk because you're not in your feelings. That's not a good way to have that conversation. That's not a good way at all. And very, it's accusatory, and it's likely to engender a very defensive response. What I could say instead, and I think more accurately, is a person with your hand. One way, let me tell you a story. And the story is a generic story about a person with the same markings that you have, Mr. Client, Ms. Client. And it'll be descriptive, and it'll be useful for us to use a fictional character with your markers who doesn't necessarily have the exact same life experience as yours, but it'll help us understand what's going on in your own wiring diagram. So can I proceed in that way? Yes. Okay, well, here I go. So imagine a person that lost love 5 lifetimes ago. Again, this doesn't have to be literally true, but I'm just making up a story. So 5 lifetimes ago, there was a person, and their spouse died, or a child died, and then their spouse, and they couldn't stay in their marriage together. It was the death of their child that somehow ruined things in the relationship, and it just made things so bad that the relationship couldn't continue. And then the person in question committed suicide, or just their whole life was empty from then on. They never recovered. And the markings in your hand, Mr. Client, Ms. Client, look just like a person who would have gone through that. So I don't know whether you've gone through that or not. It doesn't even matter whether you've gone through that. But you have a reaction base inside you that is so scared. It's like life and death. If somebody says, I'm upset, if you're married to Bob, you're married to Mary, and they say, I'm upset, whatever, there's a part of you, there's like an invisible, or maybe visible, but an invisible trigger that's set off that clicks in to the same intensity of the story that I was telling you about. So whether or not you have events in this lifetime where it makes sense that you would have this trigger in you, it doesn't matter. What I'm seeing in your hands is that triggering mechanism that exists inside of you. So with your permission, I'd like to explore that more, because this is a great opportunity. This is a gold mine, because if you can defenselessly look into this whole section of you, and in her case, she's a spiritual psychologist. This is your gold mine right here, because your life's work is to go into that gold mine and find what you can and heal what you can in that circuitry, and use that experience as a model for helping others do the same. So is that a journey that you'd like to, have you already been on that journey? Have you been on that journey for decades? If not, do you want to explore that possibility right now?
Okay, so Richard, I'm just drawing for people because you made a leap that you didn't explain, which is the spiritual psychologist being the line of clairvoyance plus the healer.
Right, you're the one who mentioned those markers, which are absolutely true. And that's a big deal, obviously. The person's a spiritual psychologist, either in reality, or it would behoove them to put on their cap, spiritual psychologist is in, because, well, that's who they are. That's how their organism functions, and hopefully they can make that a centerpiece of what they're up to. But if they're going to get there, they've got the arches and the broken heart line to get through. That's by the way, that's a very dramatic break in the heart line. It's not
absolutely right.
Yeah, so the odds are like 98%, 99% that she was born that way.
Yeah.
That if we looked at her handprints still in the womb, her heart line was broken. Isn't that interesting? I mean, how does a baby have that?
Well, 10 arches.
Mm-hmm. Well, a baby and that's part of my point. A fetus can have this, and the fetus has no basis in adult life for having this. It's not like this person's heart was broken in kindergarten, this person's heart was broken at the prom night, because they're a fetus, they're a one-day-old baby, and yet they carry this imprinting with them. And it's just my premise, and it's what I believe. Others can have different beliefs. It's my belief that this makes sense, that the hand isn't being stupid, that it's not just random, that there is purpose behind this. Whether we can understand the purpose, the degree to which we're capable of understanding the purpose is a separate question, but it's just my belief that this is not just a random movement of molecules that has no meaning whatsoever. And I'm assuming that anybody listening to us talking has a similar point of view.
Okay, so I'm just putting it to whoever's on the call, if anyone would like to come and ask you any questions on this particular, on the on the hotline, that now would be a good time.
Also, there is that small chance that the line was a normal-looking heart line when the person was born, and now it's broken. Isn't that interesting? If that were the case, if you have old prints that weren't broken and new prints that are, and usually the break would be smaller. And I've seen heart lines that break more with a little break that gets wider or a smaller break that gets closer. I've seen those. Those have a higher likelihood that what the hand is saying is literally the recording of heartbreak in this lifetime. She left me. She left me for Fred. Ah!
Yeah.
Bad enough that she left me for Fred.
There are a couple of people that I muted because of noise, so I'm not quite sure if they can unmute themselves or not. But if anybody did want to ask a question, now is the time. So, Richard, do you want to talk about where the break is on the heart line? Like, for example, this one.
Yes, I do. That one's a Mercury break.
Okay.
And you could see it overlapping with Apollo, but that's a Mercury break. And the Mercury break is about love, lost love. And I guess there's a 0.1% chance it's something else. You were separated from your twin at birth, or you watched your twin die because of something you did, and they thought it was you. I don't know. I have to twist my imagination into pretzel knots to think of other possibilities, but I'd say 99% that's a lost love with intimate partner. And also, not the loss of a child is ridiculously difficult as that, and harsh as that would be for any human to endure. No, that's lost love, at least 99% in my mind. And the ones that are under Apollo
so I'm going to have a look quickly and see if we've got any here.
I sent you
what
one.
about this one?
Yeah, that's an Apollo one. That's good.
That is Q8, page 8, for the people wanting to follow in their own documents.
Yeah, and that's, the loss of friendship and the loss of your friendship circle and being kicked out of the group. Excommunication, or as they said in elementary school when my daughter was going to school, being X'd out. Mary is X'd out. Yeah, that's what they said. If somebody behaved badly in the schoolyard, or even if they didn't behave badly, but somebody started a scandal about them and for whatever reason, and nobody was willing to play with Mary, Mary was X'd out. Being shunned.
Quite appropriate, right? And that also looks almost like it's pre this lifetime, Richard.
The break is so big, yes, I'd have to assume that it's a karmic factor that's being communicated by the hand. And again, it doesn't matter.
It's almost like a bubble here.
Yeah, but and even if it is a bubble there, it can include the intimate system as well. But it represents a disassociation from people, a disassociation from emotional contact. And in its positive, it represents a person who has grappled with the part of themselves that wants to push people away. And is there a part of you that wants to push people away, Jenna?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I hope so. There's a part of me that wants to push people away. And, you know, how much push people away do I have? How much push people away? Is there a way to measure it? How many, you know, how many inches, how many feet, how many meters worth of that is there? It's hard to measure. And in the poetry of the hand, this is I need more time for me. It's dangerous to be with people. I carry with me into this life some heartbreak of love lost, either friendship lost, love lost with a partner, both, community loss, any and all of the above, maybe loss of a child somewhere. It doesn't matter so much the exact content. I mean, it matters, but it's hard to differentiate exact content, and then sometimes there doesn't seem to be an exact causation. The person can't remember, you know, they didn't have a tough childhood, child, spouse, no deaths nearby, no breakups, you know, they're married to their high school sweetheart, who knows what. It doesn't always correlate in an easy enough way to be declarative. This is what it means in an event like this, but it does correspond, and to me this is 100%, that there's a circuit that exists, and a circuit that exists that separates me from human contact. And again, so I'm a person that takes 1 month every year to go on a vision quest, and I walk through rural Utah with a backpack and no cell phone. Okay. Is that such a terrible thing?
No, one sounds wonderful.
That is a more consciously chosen, measured, seemingly appropriate, graceful way of limiting human contact for a period of time by choice, as opposed to unconscious or blaming others for problems created by my own pullback mechanism. So if you have a pullback mechanism, a short-circuiting fuse that goes off, okay. So once you know that it's your fuse and you carry extra fuses in your backpack, you can leave the fuse out, you can put the fuse back in, you could leave it out at night and only put it on during the day like you do with the circuitry in your bedroom. Again, it's potentially zero problematic, and on the other hand, it's potentially devastating. You know, this could also be a person whose relationships are all in the crapper.
Okay.
Either is possible.
So we've got Linda Bard is with us, and she asks about
Linda Bard.
Yeah. And she asks about this line joining that almost seems to be joining them. I almost think it's like a bubble that's joining the two. But we have Chris here who can actually talk about this person because she knows the person.
Oh, well, let's hear from the horse's mouth, shall we?
So, Chris, would you like to come on?
Yes. Hi. All right. This is somebody I know very well. When these prints were taken, he was about 19 or 20 years old, and he blamed every wrong in the world on the fact that his parents got divorced when he was about 9 or 10 years old. He was very angry, and my feeling is that was what the heartbreak was over. That he still hasn't gotten over it.
Okay, so let's assume on level A that that's 100% correct.
Okay.
Let's just assume. And let's also assume that on level B, that whatever was causing the divorce was already operational during the pregnancy that led to his birth.
Right.
That's level B. But on level C, underneath that, from my perspective, there's a karmic influence at work here as well. I mean, why does a person just stumble into life like this? On the one hand, random molecules, some scientists would say we're just making up meanings where none exist. And I get the point. I like science, as a matter of fact. A lot of my fun time reading material is science magazines, etc. But I take a worldview that's different, and it's more a personal choice. Something like this, to me, is overwhelmingly karmic in influence. He was born with his heart line looking that way, and he gets to experience extremes of emotional disconnect. And this is clearly a Super Michael heart line. And as a Michael person myself, the Michael Heartline people have the longest healing process for getting over emotional wounds. Insults take longer to process through. The good news, among other things, for the Michael types is that they could still be nice to you when the relationship is bad. They're willing to listen to your point of view after you've insulted them. Not everybody is willing to listen to another person after they've been directly insulted and insulted twice in a row. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from, Bob. I'm trying to understand so that we could possibly forge a good relationship out of this, because, sometimes crisis leads to breakthrough. So could you explain to me again, because I'm not getting it. That sounds like a Michael talking. Somebody else would just take a baseball bat and slam the person on the head, or slam the door and never speak to them again. But this guy is not just a Michael, but a Super Michael. So he's got lots of that. And on the bad news side of Michael is the replay button. Are either of you two, Chris? You're not a Michael, are you, Jenna? Are you a Michael?
Yeah, I've got two.
You've got two of them, Chris. Okay.
Yes, I do. So I understand.
So you know about the replay button.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
He's got a super replay button and a broken heart line.
Yes.
So there we are. And on the, Linda has two of them as well. Yes. So,
this guy's also got quite a few composites to make it even more
separate variable, but yeah. So I try to consider the larger perspective. I try to consider the larger perspective, period. But especially in regards to somebody else's difficulties in life, I try to consider the larger perspective, which includes what can possibly be learned from this. Not just can you survive a lifetime that includes this, but can you more than survive? Can you take this as an ally? How can this serve you? And so we have crumb work. That's a crumb work set of fingerprints, Jenna. You recognize the crumb work story in there?
Yeah. I'll just highlight it for people. 1 moment.
So I'm ignoring the composite nature of the worlds for a second. We have School of Service and Saturn as the life lesson, which is doing things to avoid feeling guilty. And as a major influence in this life, this person has come to deal with guilt issues. Guilt in himself, guilt in others, relationships based on guilt, relationships based upon trying not to feel guilty, all the variations on the theme. I direct people to Life Prints to read the short story on crumb work to get an idea of what I'm talking about. But in the case, just with the information that you've described so far, Chris, the owner of this hand is playing hot potato, is trying to make other people feel guilty. Isn't that correct? His language is designed to make you, pardon?
Yeah, he likes to blame everything and everybody, but he also carries a lot of inappropriate guilt too. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So his life assignment is to get on the right side of that, and he's a teenager. So
but now he's about 20. He's 26 now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay.
Yep.
So he's a young adult.
Yes.
What statistical odds do you give somebody with these fingerprints, a broken heart line, and a super Michael of being elegant in the emotional arena at 26?
Very low.
Yeah, statistically speaking, I have to say that there's room for that possibility, because otherwise I'm saying never, and that's a good way to paint yourself into a corner in a reading. But statistically speaking, yeah, he's still very young in dealing with this issue. So I just saw on my screen. Usually I don't see this. I don't see the comments pop up. Linda said, add the conic tips to the equation too. You want to scroll up, Jenna, so we can add the conic tips to the equation? Are you in the scrolling mode, Jenna? Conic hand. Ah, conic hand. Oh, the tips aren't so conic, but the conic hand. Scroll back down if you will. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a conic bottom to this hand. It's a little bit of a philosophic hand with a conic bottom. That's interesting. A little bit of Lady in the Lake in the hand shape as well. All interesting factors. The conic bottom would certainly add a degree of sensitivity. The philosophic nature, including the big upper Saturn, would add a detachment factor as well. The Lady in the Lake, wide bottom and narrow top, extended narrow fingers with a wide bottom. The Lady in the Lake would include muddled, tangled relationships on the bad news possibility list. Yeah, and look, I don't know this person. To me, this is only a handprint to examine. So I'm talking clinically. If the person's in my office, then the person, it's the person first, and the hands are indicative of what's going on inside the person. Here, I just have handprints, so there is no person connected. I'm just talking, like looking at the x-rays, doctors comparing x-rays. But everything being said, if you start looking at the list of bad news possibilities, they all go into emotional detachment in a negative way. Emotional detachment, and it's your fault. We're not connected the way I want, and it's all on you. Anyway, I'm expecting a person who has this type, these markers in combination, to inhabit that zone for a period of time in their life. The challenge is to inhabit that zone and get out of it. But I also take the point of view, like I do when somebody has a give away your power life purpose. They've got like 9 loops and a right Jupiter tented arch, let's say. I know that person is going to give away their power in relationship, because how could they not with those fingerprints? The only question becomes, do they become conscious enough to see what's going on and to reclaim their power in a conscious way? The fact that they gave their power away is no mark against them. They signed up to do so. Can they, and the question is, can they learn from that experience and reclaim their power? So for Fred, whatever his name is with the hands, with the broken heart under Apollo, with Fred, can he paint himself into a corner where relationships are lousy and it's everybody else's fault? And we expect that to happen. We expect a childhood that includes that. We expect the schoolyard to include incidents that highlight exactly that. If I'm his father and I can objectively look at his handprints, before he's even gone to the schoolyard, I can go, oh my word, I'm expecting circumstances like that in the schoolyard. And I'm trying to create as best I can a positive frame of reference for my son to move through that tunnel and out the other side. So it's not a mark against him when life transpires and he finds himself in that condition. The challenge is, can he can he recognize what's going on enough? Can he stay conscious and learn enough to spend most of his life on the other side of that, such that when he slips into that again, he only slips for an hour, a day, maybe a week at most, maybe only a minute before he rights the ship and works his way out. Anyway, that's a communication form that I'm likely to use with a client with hands like this.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Jenna, before we get off, we've still got 20 minutes, whatever. I want to make sure to get to breaks in the lifeline. Did you disappear? Did you go out for lunch, Jenna? Actually, where you are would be dinner. So we only have her smiling face up there, Chris.
Oh, sorry.
We don't even have that anymore.
Here I am busy talking away, and I forgot that I'd muted myself.
I want to make sure not to forget the lifeline.
Okay, so I wanted you to just quickly make a comment about this hand before we go to the lifelines.
That's interesting.
It's,
I consider that more headline stuff than heartline stuff. I consider that the key thing here to my palmist eye is that we go right back to that line over there. That's a doubling under Apollo, and that's a head fragment above the primary headline. That's a head fragment under Apollo, and I see various versions of that. Usually not as flat as this one. Usually more parallel to the primary headline as well. And yes, it's a little bit of emotional energy in there, a little bit of Simeon energy in there, but primarily I consider that an Apollo fragment, a headline Apollo fragment, which to me is a tuba flute syndrome. Trying to find my place, trying to find the type of creativity that suits me the best, and in my experience, that's a strenuous marker. The person will spend a significant amount of time not feeling like they fit properly, that the I don't belong factor is likely to be strong. Whether they can overcome that in life, and it's only a small piece, and it's mostly remembered from before my first Saturn return era. I had trouble fitting in before 28, and then I found my place. That's a possibility. That would be a positive possibility. But if the person is under 28, the odds are 95+% that they're searching for their place, and it's frustrating.
And then, okay, so that's this line underneath.
Correct.
And this one on top, which goes up there.
Yeah, it's a little bit of girdle, a little bit of fragment off of the heart line. I don't know that I would call that break under Saturn, but it is. There's heartline energy in there, and it's under Saturn. But heartlines often have a northern fragment, and to consider that heartbreak, I think that's a stretch. Somebody else could make a case that it is because the line is stronger than usual up there. You can also make a case that all of this is similar to a Simeon with its pieces north and south. Fragments. I would just leave that alone myself.
Okay, so I'm going to take you now to breaks on the lifeline again, Richard. So here's one. Should we start at the bottom of the document, or would you like?
That's okay. No, just start where you are.
Okay. Do you want me to make that smaller?
It doesn't really matter. This is a typical lifeline break. And we can consider this also. Some of the lifeline is sneaking out the fate line. Yeah, there's some life. Well, the bottom of the fate line has some lifeline in it. Oh, you got this gigantic star down there too, don't you? Wow.
You mean
that's meter size. Holy cow. That is gigantic. I'm going to look at that under the magnifying glass for a second.
I will go there for you, Richard. Just one moment.
Wow. So it's really eye-catching, isn't it?
I'm just going to take a few away.
Well, no, just leave it alone for a second so that we can discuss the lifeline break.
Okay.
Because the lifeline is broken. And do you want to treat this like a 3 for 2? I need my quest, or I'm ungrounded. You could.
For the purposes of this Cool, Richard. Can you just explain what you mean by 3 for 2?
Yes, you have the lifeline. Go ahead, that's there. And you have the, and do the fate line on top of the, no. Do the fate line on top of the headline.
Do you want me to take out the Mars line? Sorry.
Yeah, take out the Mars line, take out the lower fate line that you just did. Just put in the fate line above the heart line. Move to the right and do the fate line to the right of where you are now.
Okay.
Above the headline.
Sorry, just hang on.
North of the headline.
Yeah.
Above. There we go. Yeah.
And do you want this other fate line in?
Yeah, so you can put that in. And that's 3P, no, okay, go ahead, do it. Just go ahead, do it. So you're,
Shorter.
it's okay. You're not in my brain as well as you were earlier, but that's okay.
Okay.
So you could say that you have the fate line coming up the middle and you have some lifeline and then you have another line. You got 3 lines where there ought to be 2. And that's a person whose lifeline and fate line are getting confused with each other, and that's a person who needs a mission or a quest. And we have entire interviews just on that one formation, so I don't want to go there in great detail. What I want to discuss is the lifeline break. And the, by the way, and in this case, you do have the lifeline and the fate line mingling. The 2 rivers are mingling. The bottom of the fate line from the wrist, the first 1.5 inches up, not over there, further to the right, yes. The first inch, there's some lifeline in there, go straight up the hand, straight up. There's lifeline in there and there's fate line there, go up a little higher. Thank you. There's lifeline in there, no, stop. There's lifeline in there and there's fate line in there. And that's okay, that happens a lot. And that is similar to the 3 for 2. The person has their lifeline and fate line mingled. In this case, it's an early childhood thing, and it's not the need for the quest the same way. But I don't want to go into that in great detail right now. I just want to discuss the concept of the lifeline being broken, or go back to, as a matter of fact, go back to my original one, where the lifeline is broken and it's just a little tiny break, the one we started the call with. When the lifeline is broken, the person's root chakra has a circuit break that goes out, and the person can be, the person can become ungrounded, and different possibilities exist. In the palmistry books, and I've been rereading some palmistry books from the 1800s, which I am wont to do, I like doing that, and they would discuss this as a period of health problem and potentially dangerous health problem. I haven't found that to be accurate. And I'm not saying that that could never be the case, but I just haven't found that to be accurate, hardly ever at all. And it would date the break coming down the lifeline from the north, and they would say that's about 42, and there would be a problem in the person's health at 42. And again, I don't like that interpretation. My own preference is, I don't, in this case, I don't like the lost root chakra because the hand looks too earthy, too grounded. The person is likely to have a solid, feet on the ground, earthy presentation of self. So 2 of the options for the broken lifeline is broken root chakra. The person is hyper and all over the place. A break in health, or a health challenge, or an accident or an illness, and those are 2 that I'm rejecting on this hand. But the one that I like for this hand is what I call the gada gada syndrome. And how are we doing with time? Good, because I want to have enough time to communicate this. And you've got a triangle, if you can imagine a triangle, in the lower left-hand corner, that's where I'm pointing, in the lower left-hand corner, you have, let's do something. Pardon me?
Do you mean like?
No, I'm not talking about the hand. I'm drawing an imaginary diagram on the board. Forget the triangle. Apparently that's more confusing than clarifying. Yeah. So people do something. Why do people do something? look around. Everybody's up to something, pretty much everybody. And that's what people do. Look at an ant colony. Ants do something. It's just what they do. You know, we're motivated to do X because we're motivated to do X. I'm just making the beginning of a statement here. Mm-hmm. And then we either accomplish our goal or we don't accomplish our goal. Okay, that's in the lower right-hand corner for the triangle that I was getting rid of, but you drew it in. And then we rest. We do something, we succeed or we fail or something else, and then we rest. And that would be the top of the triangle. Then we rest. And so then after we eat lunch, whatever. So after we eat lunch, what do? Sooner or later, we do something again. And we do something again, it either works, it doesn't work, or some other thing happens. And then we eat dinner, and, you know, etc. So this is a normal operational diagram of human activity. When the lifeline is broken, the triangle is broken. So what happens is, and I may or may not be spending a bunch of time in a reading discussing this with a client, but for some clients, and with this client, it would be a good discussion to have. So for some people, they do something, and then it either succeeds or it fails. But when they go to the top of the pyramid where it's time to rest and to eat lunch or whatever, instead of resting and saying, life is good, okay, I'm going to eat lunch and just be present for lunch. And then when lunch is over, what am I going to do now? The cycle is broken, the triangle is broken. And instead of rest positive, which is what I just described, the person goes into rest negative, which is life is bad, that wasn't good. I have to do something to make everything better. The next action I take is either going to validate my life, make everything okay, or it will fail to do something and I'm bad. When you do something that way, inevitably outcomes are worse, and when you get to the top of the pyramid, the next day, you feel even worse because whatever happened yesterday, it didn't fix whatever was bothering you. So again, you do something, you win or you lose, it feels bad. I have to do something to make everything okay. And when you try to make the next thing that you do is going to validate your whole existence, the next thing you do is probably not going to validate your whole existence, no matter what the outcome is. Let's walk over the hill to see what's on the other side of the hill. Oh, another hill. Or you climb Mount Everest and then you go, is that all there is? I thought it was going to validate my whole existence. So there is a problem, if you will, in the rest part of the cycle. And the person is challenged to be able to rest and rejuvenate properly and then take action because they want to take action, as opposed to take action in such a way as to try to make everything okay forever. Because, you know, when you try to make everything okay forever, it just doesn't work that way. So that I call it the gotta syndrome. I gotta do this, I gotta do that, and it's a little bit like arches. Well, actually, from the outside, a videotape might make it look like a person who is doing arch behavior because, you know, it looks very much like arching. But underneath it is the idea of trying to make everything okay in one fell swoop.
Okay. So
that's like the gambler trying to make the big score so that he could pay off the mafia for all the money he's borrowed.
Yeah. So that's often the short lifeline when there isn't a break. I mean, yeah. But
any break, any short lifeline, any of that, any lifeline issues can be what I'm calling the gotta syndrome.
Okay, good.
It can and it's on the list of things that happen with broken lifelines. Mm-hmm. I don't use it all the time. Again, here's the menu of options for a broken lifeline. It can be a break in health. I mean, the ancient palmers weren't 100% wrong, although that's on the bottom of my list. It can also be a weak root chakra. the person is scattered and they're adrift at sea. They have no anchor, and they're all over the place. But it can also be the goddess syndrome, which is I'm trying to make the next thing I do make up for my whole life.
Okay. So Richard, your mum, who lived well into her 90s, had a break.
No, she died a few weeks before 90, but you know, she made it to 89 and 11/12.
And she had a major break on her lifeline, didn't she?
She had a lifeline break.
And where was it?
About where this one is, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
But that brings up a fourth factor in lifeline break, which can be family issues.
Yeah, being the family line. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And it could be, I hate to say break with family members, but I'll just say difficulty with family members. Break would be a difficulty with family members. That's also on the list of lifeline break possibilities.
It's interesting that it would be on the lifeline and not on the heartline.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so should we look at a few more of the hands in this document, or is there anything else you would like to say before that? Because we've only got a couple of minutes.
Well, I noticed that. I think that's interesting. So I'm looking up at the clock now, and it's 10:59. So the 1 minute to go, you'd like to look at a few more heart lines? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Hold it. I think that you're in the grip of the gotta syndrome. We've got to look at.
Yeah, that's the Mr.
We've got to look at multiple. Yeah. So are we going to be visiting? Let me just ask you: are we going to be visiting broken major lines again next Tuesday?
Yeah, well, it's usually our threading call tomorrow, so we could just continue with this document and add more handprints as people submit them.
Yes, as a member of the Arch clan, and it's my job to practice the easy way. I enlist your support in having my life be easy. And I'm just floating down the river in my inner tube, Jenna. So with that in mind, this would be a good time not to look at more handprints and try to squeeze 7 of them in to the last 16 seconds. Although, of course, I could do that if I wanted to.
I see the rebellion.
Thank you, Jenna.
Richard.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for being with us, and we'll get people to submit questions for next week.
Okay, good enough.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Adios.
Thanks for being with us. Bye. Bye, Chris. Bye, Kay. Cecilia. Thanks.
Bye, Jenna.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Jenna. Bye, Kay.
Bye,
everybody.
You.
Thank
Bye.
you, Jenna. Thank you, Richard.
Bye, Jenna. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being with us. I actually switched off the video. I mean, not the video, the just hang on. I'm trying to switch off the video, but it's disappeared.
How fun to see everyone.
Good to see you.
Yeah, great to
Hi,
see
Chris.
you all.
Hi, Phil.
Selma here.
I figured out how to leave this thing now.
Is that Chris Kidder?